Hello and welcome to Champ Select, your go-to competitive Legends of Runeterra podcast. I'm Alex. As per usual, joining me are my two co-hosts, Noble.
Hello.
And Hugh.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about the meta. It's been a little bit since Empires of the Ascended has released. It's finally given enough time for things to kind of settle down. People have tried all the things they want to try for the most part. You know, there's still some stuff floating around. There's lots of brews still, but, you know, we're pretty much done seeing these absolutely awful decks on ladder now, right? So, like, things are starting to settle down. We're starting to see a meta really develop, and in particular, one certain deck is really kind of claiming itself as tier 0, I think,
absolutely.
At this point.
Kindred Nasus has just felt unbeatable on
Deep
ladder. Like,
is
have you ever
completely
played
unassailable.
that deck?
Just unassailable.
That new card, insane.
Yeah, I don't know the name
Weird
of it.
little sea scarab.
Scab.
Sea scarab. It's a scarab.
Okay. So clearly we're talking about TF Fizz and the appropriately foretold Burble Menace. That being said, we're going to get into all that and some viewer questions, but I think we want to start off with sort of just a quick update. What have you guys been playing? What have you guys been liking? How's your climbing been going?
Yeah, so I've been streaming a good amount. Not actually on Lounging Wizard very much, though I'll get back to that. But on our good friend Closing Times stream, where he gave me some something we jokingly referred to as coaching, but it seemed to work because I went a pretty clean, like noodled around a little bit, and then I went a very clean 7-0 with TF Fizz, just straight into diamonds, and then I've been testing out brews there. And taking my time a little bit, but you know, I'm climbing up. Like, expect to get to Masters by next week pretty easily, especially because, spoiler alert, the balance patch came out today, or the day we're recording this, so 2 days ago. If you're listening to this on the day we release it, funny how time works. There were no balance changes, so gonna use TF Fizz to get to Masters.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's
what we're doing.
2 more weeks of Burble.
Yeah, which people seem to be fairly upset about.
Yeah, I think that there's a real, like, people like to complain in card games, especially like communities, and it tends to echo chambers. So like when there's a deck that's a little bit too good, it's usually the topic of a lot of tweets or a lot of Reddit posts or whatever.
Well, it doesn't even have to be a little bit too good.
Yeah, it can be not so good.
It can even be terrible.
It'll be the topic, but and I'm usually pretty reserved, but I think I'm actually with the majority here on this one. I think TF is too good right now, to be honest. I think that it's pretty much tier 0, and unless you want to beat it, like, you have to really try to beat it. Like with your deck, I think that there are very few decks that can just ship up and claim to have a above 50% win rate against TF Fizz.
I mean, we talked about it when we were talking about the last seasonal tournament. Time and time again, we mentioned that, like, part of the reason we needed to put it in our lineup was because
it was the third deck with a good win rate.
Well, it was just because, like, the question was, we kept saying, like, everyone's going to bring TF Fizz, so why don't we bring a deck that beats TF Fizz? And we were just like, well, we'll just bring TF Fizz because
it's good against the mirror, and it's even in the mirror and good against everyone else. Like, exactly,
and like, there's not, like you just said, you can't attack the deck very well. It's just really, really hard to make a deck that's beating TF Fizz and other decks.
Yeah, because it's still the ladder, right? You know, even if TF Fizz is the most played deck by a lot, you're still only going to queue into it. Probably 1 in 3 games at most, right? On average,
within reason.
And there are a lot of stretches where you play against TF Fizz 5 times in a row, and you're just like, oh my god, like, it's everywhere.
I'm sorry, that was me.
Yeah, but it's, you know, like, realistically, you're still going to queue into a lot of other stuff. So, like, it's really hard to tune your ladder deck, specifically your ladder deck, to beat TF Fizz and be reasonable against the rest of the field, right? Like, and you know, there are a lot of sweet decks and a lot of just general meta reports, but I know Noble has a graphic pulled up with an actual meta report here.
On that note, we were just talking about ladder, and as far as tournaments go, there was a Tools of Shurima tournament. I don't know if it was actually sponsored by Riot, but the top 16. So this was the, you know, pick, ban, play 2, or ban, pick, you know.
The tournament line. Tournament format.
Which was the Duels of Shurima. Top 16 had 13 TF Fizz decks, 10 Shen Fiora decks, and 8 Aphelios Temple decks, 7 List Trundle decks, and then thing after that is 2 ofs and 1 ofs. So like that's a very clear
13 is so
13
many.
out of the 16 people that top 16 in this tournament brought TF.
That is over
That's
75% of the fields.
Yeah,
That top
of
16.
the top 16. Yeah,
Yeah.
and then like something close to that for Shen Fiora is a 10, right? Like that's like 60% or something. 10 out of 16.
Yeah. It's like they're like shocking numbers, right?
Yeah, really, honestly. And then, Aphelios Temple is still 50%. And some of that is because of the ladder format, right? You're bringing 3 decks. So it's just so much more likely that that you're going to have what are considered the best decks in your lineup because
you have to bring 3.
Yeah, for these numbers to really meaningful change, multiple people would have to bring decks that didn't have Shen Fiora or TF Fizz or an Aphelios Temple deck in their lineup. Like that's just not going to happen.
Yeah, you're going to bring one of those like almost always.
Yeah,
right?
one, sometimes 2. And like everybody bringing 2 gets you to numbers kind of like this. And there is some cool stuff in here that's like Frostbite. There's Nasus decks. There's Slay Aggro. There's Nightfall, Swain Sejuani, like LeBlanc Sivir. Like there's like cool decks that use the new cards, but most lineups were playing like one of those. Is that a problem? Like,
not yet.
Yeah.
Is what I would say, because like the meta's kind of just really settling fairly recently, and like this is a recent tournament.
Yeah.
People are gonna, in a tournament especially, people are gonna default to what they know, what they've played, what they've had success with, and these new cards just haven't had the time to be tested.
Yeah, and the new cards have impacted the meta. I do really want to, I guess, take a moment away from the like TF Fizz bad guy stuff and talk about like the cool new decks that are existing with the new cards. Like the Sand Scouts deck, the like Lucian Azir. That deck has really impressed me. And it's really cool. It's really sweet. And I think it's the best Shurima deck.
I think we can pretty confidently say that at this point.
Yeah, and I wish that there were a few more Shurima decks floating around. There's a lot of like Nasus X stuff as well. Those seemed less good to me. I don't know. Sand Scouts is just like, I don't think I've beat that deck. I think I've played it against it like 4 times. I think I'm like actually 0-4 against it or something. Like it's just been smoking me.
That's fair. I beat that deck pretty consistently with both TF Fizz and Lysandre Trundle, which is another deck that gets a ton of... Lysandre Trundle is obviously very affected by the new expansion, which is pretty cool to see. It's good that there are new decks. And honestly, we missed the boat on Lysandre a little bit. We definitely predicted Azir would be powerful. And after, I think, playing with Lysandre, we kind of immediately...
Yeah, Lysandre was like the one game realization for me.
Excuse me, you missed
I know.
the boat.
I didn't want to confidently say that the podcast had been on it, but Hugh definitely was.
He was on it, yeah. Lysandre just played really, really good.
Yeah,
it has played really, really good.
You try putting... I was playing Burblefish the other day, and they just flipped their Lysandre, and I'm like, I can never win. Like, not only do my like creatures hit his face for 1 or 2 damage, they also... It's ice sharding my 3/1s every turn.
Yeah, not gonna win.
Broken.
Yeah, that is not winnable.
That card needs to be fixed.
it's killing all of my Burblefish. Yeah, that deck has gone through a couple of changes actually as well, and I've seen a lot of the newer like Trundle Lysandre decks have been a lot more in on like these like Watcher combo things. And I've seen a lot of like 3x Fading Memories Lysandre decks.
Spectral Matron.
Yeah, with like a bunch of Spectral Matron, and I thought that stuff was going to be garbage. It's not garbage. It's actually really good. It gives the deck like, it means you have a plan, and a really good one at least, right? Like you can just play your Wraths and your defensive spells and your removal spells until eventually you just have a plan, and you can like Ice Pillar Fading Memories, my Ice Pillar to like
Spectral Matron Watcher.
Yeah, Spectral Matron Watcher or whatever. Like those turns happen a lot where you just like play Ice Pillar to flip or whatever.
And it notably really helps in the mirror, where before it's just like this grindy, or Nexuses are tough, like you're trying to get in with like increments of like 4 or 5 overwhelm damage from like 8/8s or Trundles, and you're like trying to set up an Atrocity, but they have Frostbites, and the mirror's just stalled out really hard, and you ended up ending him with Watcher anyway, but just like naturally doing it after a bunch of Ledroses or whatever. And this just turns out to be a way better way to do it.
Yeah, I think that and one of the biggest reasons why I'm like so into these like slightly combo-ier versions of these deck, and this ties a little bit into earlier today, Tuesday. Me and Noble did a stream with our friend Nico, Closing Time, where we did like part 2 of the like in Empires of the Ascended tier list in general. We uploaded part 1 of that tier list with all of the Shurima cards. It's already on our YouTube, and part 2 should be on our YouTube as well by the time this goes up. So,
and the graphics are pretty easily accessible, and we'll be spreading them around continually on Twitter and all that.
So if you want to check those out, please go ahead and watch those VODs. But specifically, one specific card that got talked about today was Dracthorn Inquisitor.
Yeah.
And Nico was like, oh yeah, this card's like great. People are playing it a lot. And I think that card is just a trap. Like, I just have not been impressed with Dracthorn Inquisitor. I like vetoed it into C tier. Like, because I really wanted to make the point that I was like, and this is like why, one of the big reasons why I'm in on these like combo-y versions is because we're taking out these like Dracthorn Inquisitors and these like frozen thralls or whatever out of this deck. And I thought those cards were quite bad. So I'm like really excited to replace them with a plan. Even a plan of any kind, but a better plan, I think, too.
Absolutely. And real quick, for those who maybe haven't seen it, the way we did the tier list thing is each person got one veto to change the rank of one card from where it was collectively put to a new rank. Every person gets to up or down
one.
Yeah. Oh, up or down one? I thought it was up or down at all.
It was up or down any amount, but we all only did it up or down one, and I think to maintain the peace, and then we just kind of like codified that for the second one, you know?
Oh, okay.
I don't think anyone like really nuked anything.
You
know,
otherwise
there
no
I was
F to
definitely
S tier
I was
nonsense.
sending things to S tier. Yeah. We have to maintain the integrity of the tier list a little bit.
But yeah, I don't know. That was just one of those things where like Nico like didn't really. Nico wasn't on board with that, and that's fine. But like, man, I really want to stop and talk about the fact that I have really been unimpressed with that card.
Oh, that card's bad.
Yeah, I really do not think that card's very good. And maybe people who are listening out there have had good results with it and really like the card or something. I would love to hear those opinions. If you're someone who thinks that Dracthorn Inquisitor has just been like insane for you, then like please tell me why and change my mind. But man, I've put that card into play like 7 or 8 times, and it was just bad.
Yeah,
like almost every time.
Every single time, like I've never been impressed with the card. I thought maybe it would be good, and I was just like, I'm fully off it now. If someone has found a way to make it good, I'd really like to see what it is. But currently, it doesn't look like there is a way to make it good in the game.
Yeah, I really think that the like combo version of the Lysandra Trundle deck is where you want to be for sure.
I think noting that and kind of center our discussion a little bit, we got the very nice meta review by Cosmic Makes Plays on Twitter, who does the meta reviews. They do the like compilation of all the spoilers. They're an awesome pillar of the community.
Oh, so nice to have.
Ton of data, and they represent it really clearly visually, which is huge. And they did the March 15th meta review, getting some data from, I think, Riot.
It's straight from Riot, yeah.
And we ended up currently at 12% of the meta being Trundle Lysandra Control. I kept trying to like make a ship name out of there, and it just didn't work. 9% of the meta being TF Fizz, 8% Fiora Shen, 6% Nasus Endure, 5% Mono Fiora, which are the Freljord decks, 5% Azir Scouts, 5% Ashe Midrange, 4% LeBlanc Sivir, and 3% Discard Aggro. And this is actually does look like a pretty diverse and healthy meta. Looking at the win rates, the Lysandra Trundle deck is 51% of the metagame. That seems totally healthy, especially for a most played deck.
Yeah, 51% is a little bit higher than you would expect the most played deck to have on average. Normally, the higher the play rate, the lower the win rate is on average, should be, of any given deck, which is generally true of like any game. Like the more something is played, the lower the win rate it is, because there are more people playing it who have never played it before, right? Like every player who
also
has
people
to put
are probably
in,
targeting it if it's the most popular deck.
Yeah, and every player that has to put in the 10 games or whatever to be familiar with a deck, the more people who play it, the more people have to play those 10 games to be familiar with a deck. So 51% is perhaps a little bit low, and the deck's maybe a little bit more powerful than that. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, Twisted Fate Fizz and Fiora Shen both sitting pretty at 56% win rates.
That is insane.
Yeah, but they both have 44 or 47% win rates, respectively, against the Lysandra Trundle deck. So it's pretty clear, that's the most played deck, and it's beating up on the best win rate decks.
But those two decks are just smashing all the jank.
And if that deck wasn't, and if Lysandra Trundle wasn't keeping those decks down, it's very possible that they would have really obscene win rates if they didn't have, weren't 5% dogs to the most played deck.
It's also pretty interesting that must mean that in that case, if we're seeing a 51% win rate, Lysandra Trundle overall, and it's boasting a 56% win rate against the second and third most played decks. Like that would lead me to believe that the deck probably has a negative win rate in almost every other matchup, right? Which is kind of
It has a
interesting.
negative win rate against the Azir Scouts deck, but it's positive against Nasus Kindred, Freljord Fiora, Ash Sedge. It's positive against everything else.
It's
All right, well, I don't get it, I guess.
Yeah, no, I was gonna say like I've played a lot of that deck, and the deck feels very consistent, very strong, and very resilient to aggro, which is a big thing.
Oh, yeah,
because a lot of people are jamming.
I think that
aggro.
deck's really good. I guess I just don't know how the aggregate numbers added up. I guess there's just a lot of
There's
jank.
43% of the meta is other. So like
Yeah.
that's where a lot of that weird meta stuff comes
That tracks, I guess. But yeah, I guess having a winning rate.
in. Yeah,
Right.
it is a 76% favorite against discard or burn aggro.
Oh,
Like
Yeah,
that
no, you-
God dumpsters aggro.
That is
it is not
disgusting.
even close.
Yeah, you can't.
Like that is an
win.
obscene. That is an obscene win for it. Like it's hard to elaborate how
76% is just
nuts
ridiculous.
76% is.
It is very hard to have a 76% win rate in a card game in any matchup, especially over this many games. Like you can have like 80-20 matchups are nigh unheard of in card games, and that's very close to
Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
right? Like that's crazy.
Then everything else looks pretty healthy. The other highest one, which kind of surprises me, is Ash Sejuani, not even Ash LeBlanc, at a 54% win rate against the field. And even though it's a 60% dog to the, or 75% dog to the biggest one, that deck has a
Yikes.
53% aggregate win rate.
Wow. That's pretty interesting. That makes quite a bit of sense to me. I played a little bit of the the Ash LeBlanc deck. So not Ash Sejuani, Ash LeBlanc. Last night, a little bit this morning on stream as well. And I just think that deck's pretty good. Like it really slams jank decks a lot. Like it just makes efficient plays. It threatens your life total.
Yeah.
And if you just it really just has very high tempo turns a lot of the time. Like sometimes there's that deck just like really runs you over. And I'm sure we've all felt that with the Ash Sejuani deck before in the past, where they just play a million 5/5s and you're like, I can never ever win.
Yeah.
It just has games like that.
Yeah, and it's really, really, really punishing against decks that don't have like very little removal. Like they try and just contest the board effectively. Like it really, really.
It
does a good
usually
job.
slams those decks.
Yeah, you got to have something if you're going to beat that deck.
And you get the nice Fiora Shen matchup, which is always really good to have, especially on ladder, because there's so much Fiora Shen on ladder, just always. So like having a good Fiora Shen matchup, not a lot of decks usually can say that. So
Yeah. So looking at that meta report, is this something that screams changes? I know like Twitter and Reddit are on fire about like, oh my God, there's a patch today. There were no balance changes. It's another 2 weeks. This makes me not want to play the game. And it's like, dude, that deck has a 9% play rate. Like every 10 games you're going to play against it once. Like, and it's also
think it's too
potentially
good,
true
yeah.
that it's going to be going up.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be going up. And that win rate is probably too high, especially when people know it exists and are targeting it.
Also,
Yeah.
there's something to be noted that the meta does change from tier to tier a little bit. Like there's
Oh, that's certainly true.
like Plat's very different from Masters, which is very different from Bronze. Like
And early in this season, all 10 Masters players, the only 10 that had made it were all done it with TFS. And that's because and that's usually because, it's a very fast, deck has both fast games and is unchanged from the previous version. So you can just like,
it's going to be
collect.
good.
Yeah. And you can just collect on all the people trying to play Shurima cards or whatever, or new cards.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that having a 56% win rate is problematic. That is too high. And Fiora Shen actually also apparently has a 56% win rate, which is quite interesting because that would not have been one of the decks that was immediately on my radar. It's like, whoa, that's way too high. But a 56% win rate while having a 44% matchup against the best deck means that like it is just slamming other decks.
Oh, yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, it's just, I mean, have you guys have, surely, the feeling when you're playing TF Fizz and your opponent is playing, like
Anything.
like some deck that isn't the best ever. Maybe it's
Shyvana
like,
Dragons.
yeah,
like tier 2, solidly tier 2.
anything tier 2, really. Like anything at all that's tier 2.
You look at it and you're like, well, okay.
Like any Aurelian Soul deck or whatever.
Oh
like,
God, any
know,
Aurelian Soul
it's
deck
just-
does not. Yeah.
you're just gonna you just collect on these people. Like they just don't stand a chance, right? Like, and this deck, I think it really does impact the meta in a kind of negative way at this point, where it's just so hard to play a deck that doesn't get slammed by Fizz TF. And even when you think you're like doing all right, like they just draw their whole deck every game.
I see my whole deck every matchup. Like you have to kill 3 Twisted Fates before they level and to deal with
Fizz, which a lot of decks just can't do.
Yeah, and suit ups and like I was playing games when I was on that 7-0 ladder run, which is not a huge sample size, but like
but still
fucking destroying people. Like I was like I would be spots where I was like, okay, I can never win this game, and then 2 turns later, I was like, okay, I can never lose.
Yeah,
like it's just absolutely obscene. Like
the amount of games that you look at with that deck and you're like, oh, I can never win, versus the amount of games you look at and you're like, oh, I can never lose. Like you never lose the games you can never lose, and you win the games that you thought you could never win like half the time because you just draw like 7 cards on your next turn or
like
something.
I have 2 cards in hand. How am I going to win? And then you like go to your turn. You're like, oh, I have a pick of card coming off. I have 6 cards in hand.
Yeah,
it's over.
Right? Yeah, you're like, I have 6 cards. One of them was rummage, discarding, stress testing. Here's 3 more. Right?
Yeah,
like you're just gonna find the answers you need. Like
so easy to just like 0.7 points of burn at your opponent's face out of nowhere because you just like draw your deck and like, oh, I found all my mystic shots and get excited.
And flipped Twisted Fate is just
nonsense.
Absolutely as game winning as it always has been. So
the only time I was close to losing was when I had 5 cards left in my deck and was gonna deck, like literally.
and then you were 5 turns away from losing.
yeah. I mean, I had a flip Twisted Fate in play. So
so we were like 2 turns away.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think that it's a little too much, little overtuned. And this is I feel like we've hit the point in the card game where, because every card that's ever been printed is legal, things like Turbo Xerox, things like these powerful mid-range synergy decks, just overtuned. Like it's just going to be so hard for a deck that has Shurima worth of cards to compete with a deck that has, Fiora Shen has 2 champions from Foundations and then cards from, it has Sharp Sight, it's
gotten
Golden
an upgrade.
Aegis, like it keeps getting upgrades. Yeah.
I think there's been a new addition to Fiora Shen every single time new cards have come out that have made the deck better.
Yeah, exactly. And like it's rarely been hit with nerfs because it's rarely been too good. I think we're at that point now, but it's that point where, since you don't have formats, since this is a legacy format where all the cards are legal, like some decks just aren't going to be playable. It is absolutely you cannot ask for Riot to be able to balance a metagame with this many decks where a lot of decks are viable. Like, 7, 10 decks are viable right now, but it gets more than that. People, I was hearing people in the Reddit talk being like, why aren't we buffing old cards? Like, buffing old cards shake up the meta. And it's like, I don't think we want to live in that world where all of the decks are insane. It's really hard to, like, what do you even change out of TF Fizz or Fiora Shen?
It's hard.
Like, people like nerf Bright Steel Protector. Like, that card is so far down the list of cards I would nerf, but I also don't know what the hell else to nerf.
Yeah. It's getting kind of hard, right? Like, and I think that I want to start with just a couple numbers changes, probably. Like, I don't really know what they are exactly yet, and I think we've got some viewer questions that are along this line, so we'll probably get to that then. But
yeah, I was gonna say I just don't really agree with that take.
Interesting.
I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we're at the point where we're too, like, you said that we don't want every deck to be insane, which that alone I kind of disagree with also.
You just want to play some busted stuff.
Well, no, it's
you
not
just
that.
Want the decks to like feel really good.
It's that so first of all, when everything's insane, nothing is.
Yeah,
right?
sure, but
like and I get what you mean. I do understand what you meant, and I still think that we're not at the point where there's too many cards. Like Fiora Shen is a good example. It has gotten better with every iteration, and it might finally be a bit of an issue, but it still might not be. Like there's still an argument to be made there, and I think that's pretty crazy that the deck has never stopped getting better and is still maybe not an issue. I think the biggest issue is, like, TF Fizz is too good. I agree with that. But I think part of what the problem is with that deck being too good is the reason it's too good, which I think is it gets around so much of the game in that its win con is a massive pile of elusive creatures that finish you with burn. In addition to, you draw your deck every game. Like, all those 3 things, like 2 out of those 3 things is probably fine in a deck.
But it's just so consistent.
It's so consistent. Like,
Because
you
you
can't,
draw your whole deck every game.
yeah, and all of a sudden, when your entire deck is made of pretty big elusive creatures, it just there's certain there's entire
cost 0
archetypes.
mana. Yeah.
There's entire archetypes that suddenly are invalidated, and
Yeah.
that's like the biggest problem. I think if it was a deck that was winning with undercosted vanilla creatures, just like a 3 mana 5/5, like obviously that's like way overtuned. But if it was a deck that was winning with creatures that were that,
If that was the payoff instead of 0 mana 4/2 elusive.
exactly, instead of a 0 mana 4/2 elusive or a 3 mana 4/2 elusive, whatever, like
Yeah.
you know, the difference between elusive and not elusive in this game is still surprisingly so huge, and that's another thing. Like, I am still very surprised that the game has existed for this amount of time, and there's still seemingly so few answers to that keyword. Like, there's several regions that just don't really have it on their creatures, or is there a region that doesn't have an elusive creature?
I doubt it.
Noxus.
I don't. That's not true. There's at least the new one. The 1 mana. No, Noxus. It says, do they not have a single elusive creature? I think it might be. I think you might be right. It might be Noxus.
I know, Shurima. I think Shurima only has the one that
Psy
can.
Scout.
Yeah, the one that
Psy
can
Scout.
get elusive sometimes, but not always, and only if you build your deck to do so. Like, and Shurima also doesn't have very much removal. Like some other regions, Noxus does have a decent amount of removal for sure, but they either have 0 or probably 1 elusive creature. Like, there's just, after all this time, there's just a really bizarre lack of answers to elusive still.
Yeah, there aren't good, and this is part of there aren't good answers to TF Fizz problem. Probably this is the bigger
Right,
issue.
and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
That's the
as a
big
whole.
problem with TF Fizz as a whole is not that it's the best deck per se. It's the best deck for reasons that are indicative of a larger problem.
That's fascinating. I hadn't really considered this before. I really like that point. Yeah, it's just hard to answer elusive creatures at this point in the game.
Yeah. Noxus, Demacia, Shadow Isles all don't have elusive creatures.
Really? Shadow Isles doesn't have one?
Nope.
Wow.
Zero. Nope. Yeah. I mean, I'm looking through it right now. Not even a card with
Did
the
you click
word-
show unowned?
Oh, that might help, but I don't think it'll change that much. Okay, Bubble Bear popped up.
Oh, bubble.
That doesn't count.
That doesn't count
Does
at all.
not count.
I mean, it's also Bilgewater.
It is also Bilgewater, so it like really doesn't count.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, so I'm seeing Ionia cards, I'm seeing Targon cards, I'm seeing Bilgewater cards, I'm seeing Piltover's on cards, and that's it.
Wow.
That's
Yeah. So also,
So, okay, so like what? That
Yeah,
means
so-
Shadow Isles, Noxus,
And Demacia.
Demacia, Freljord, Shurima all don't have elusives in them.
Shurima
Yeah.
at least has the Sky Scout.
Sky
which,
Scout.
like,
barely
that's
counts.
about it.
Yeah,
and that's
Freljord has Avalanche, which counts as a way to deal with elusive
Yeah.
creatures.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Like, I'm not saying that you need to have elusive creatures to deal with elusive. Like, Freljord is obviously one of the best regions in general at dealing with elusive creatures because elusive creatures very frequently
Have less than 2 toughness.
exactly have a very low health stat line, which is
Continue, sorry.
yeah. I was just gonna say, like, you don't need elusive creatures to deal with elusives, and it also is interesting that Ionia used to be the elusive region.
So this is what I'm thinking. What if we just buff Shadow Assassin?
Well, first of all, we should.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, just revert the bust on Shadow Assassin, revert the bust on Navorti Conspirator, revert the bust on Kenku Lifeblade. Now let's see what happens, man.
That's not enough, I think. Also, Ionia has now been replaced as the elusive region by Bilgewater.
And it's been replaced as the counterspell region by Shurima.
Yeah, exactly.
I just don't know why he would play Ionia for any card other than Shen nowadays.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, it's like I would play Ionia in fewer Shen because there's more than one good Ionia card that deck wants, right? Like River Shaper jumps to mind.
Deny, yeah.
Yeah.
Deny is still good, don't get me wrong.
Yeah,
like,
and-
that's still a very powerful card.
And Shen's still the best creature in the deck, so like, you know, I'm
Other than maybe River Shaper, but probably still Shen.
yeah. So like there's a good stake for that decks to still be Ionia, but a lot of the Fiora decks have moved on to being like Mono Fiora and Freljord because like they just wanted all of the better Freljord combat trick spells, and Ionia was like supposed to have a bunch of tricksy stuff, and turns out they just like dump a champion and take a bunch of pump spells instead or whatever, which is interesting too.
Yeah, absolutely. And then like the same is like, okay, see people playing this Lysandra Ionia deck, and I'm like, why? Like, maybe
what?
Is that the Monastery of Hirana deck?
Yeah, like Mountain Pillar, and it's
That
like
deck is
playing
so
the
sick.
recall deck, the recall card that lets you replay.
Don't do that.
Like, say if you're
Nina
Lysandra from
Swiftfoot's at the top.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that deck
exactly.
is so cool.
I got Nina Swift-footed and was gonna die, and then had Deny in my hand and didn't die, and then killed them. That game was a good time. They just they took my River Shaper to the face. Like, I attacked River Shaper into Lysandra like 3 times, and they just took it. Then I attacked it into Tail of the Dragon, and they took it. And I was like,
no,
this is not how you win games.
You
against this
cannot
deck
be doing
opponent.
that.
Yeah, no, that's you
River
can't-
Shaper is one of those forced plays where you know you're getting blown out, but you can always do it. You know, it's like I am never going to be the chump that just let my opponent get in for free with a River Shaper. Like, even if I know I'm walking into a blowout, like that card, you just have to block that card. Like, you just have to make them.
You got to
spend
try.
mana.
You
Like,
have to try.
Yeah, like at least if they're going to spend their turn, you know, casting a spell to kill your thing, draw a card, at least they have to spend the mana to do it, right?
Yeah,
Like at least that's their turn, and you can like develop some stuff or whatever.
Yeah. Anyway, and yeah, so Ionia just needs some help. It did not help that it didn't get into champion this expansion or last expansion, like,
Or good
yikes.
cards.
Yeah, I honestly even more than want to see Twisted Fate Fizz nerfs. I really want to see some Ionia buffs because I think that region, that is one of the regions that should have the tools to combat this deck.
Yeah.
But it's so unplayable that like just none of the answers are
Solitary
good.
Monk too, like all of these things that used to be too good when the card pool was really restricted, like there was a period where so many of the decks were either mid-range Fiora decks or PNZ control decks that only creatures were elusives that were Shadow Assassin and Solitary Monk, and that's still a problem. Like, that's still the elusive thing happening, but
that's not going to be a potent enough win condition anymore, right?
Yeah, absolutely
like,
not.
You can't just put an Empyrean in your control deck and be like, yeah, I'll be able to win the game. I have an Empyrean. Like, like, you can't do that anymore.
I mean, you never could, but like,
yeah, I mean, you really
kind of
could, though.
could. Yeah,
Like,
honestly, like,
I
a
remember
little
putting
bit.
an Empyrean in my like
do it.
Heimer Karma deck and being like, this is my 7th win condition.
But and stop me when this
Just
starts
killing
to sound familiar. Heimerdinger, that Heimer Karma deck was a deck that finished the game with burn spells and 0 mana 3/1 elusives. Like, that was how that deck won. It needed to get nerfs. Like, hugely tempo turns that played a bunch of 0 mana 3/1 Heimer turrets and like killed people with them. Like, and they were elusive, and that was the problem. That was
true.
clearly the problem with the card. They
Yeah, as
mid
soon
that card
as-
fearsome, not even close to good.
I haven't seen a Heimerdinger in play since then.
You
Literally,
didn't play against Weimer ever?
I don't think and I understand that Weimer was a reasonable deck that people could play, but yes, I actually think I just haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Like, I somehow have just never run into it on ladder or whatever, or in tournament or anything.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of there was back to another thing that you said, the thing about what was it exactly? Something about you don't want every deck to be broken. I'd rather every deck be quote unquote broken because it is a fairly level playing field, and I want decks to feel good. It's very important because part of yet another problem with TF Fizz, because we're going to come back to it. We're just going to keep coming back to it. Another problem with TF Fizz is that it is the antithesis of fun.
I love that deck so much.
You can't. Oh yeah, don't get me wrong. It's my favorite. I adore the deck. I love it. I mean, we're all huge spikes. It is the spikiest deck ever. It is you
so
see your
spiky.
entire deck every game.
There's nothing cool about that.
There's
deck.
no fat.
You're
Yeah.
wrong. It's so sick.
The cool, exactly. The cool things are all my spells are so efficient.
Everything's
So
so
But
efficient.
nobody's ever like, you will not believe the sweetest thing. I slammed a 0 mana 3/1. No, it's like, when your friends are playing these Monastery of Hirana decks and they come to you with these sweet stories.
Okay,
They're
that's
sweet. And then you're like, guess what I did in my game of ladder? You'll never believe it. I put 12 elusive power into play for 4 mana.
To be fair, there is
Crickets.
a ton of outplay potential with that deck, which is yet another reason why it's so good. But like
I said, don't get me wrong. The deck is really fun to play and
Very hard.
Very hard.
difficult.
Skill testing. I really like the deck because I really like all of my spells being efficient. But like it said, it's not really all that cool.
Yeah.
It's like burn spells and efficient creatures.
Yeah, but and those things
And card draw
prey
spells.
on fun. Like you cannot.
Those things prey on fun.
They do. Elusives finishing with burn in a deck that that draws its whole deck every game.
Yeah, it's not interactable.
You just can't play deep against it.
You can.
And I just want to say, like,
the black hole's fun.
a big part of that is like so often I think, okay, my opponent's dead like 6 ways to Sunday because there's just nothing in their regions that interacts with it. I'm like,
Yes.
This is part of the
they're at
unlosable
6,
game thing
they're
that
at
I said
6.
earlier.
It's the mirror. I have 2 Get Exciteds. They're 7, 2 Mystic Shots and a Get Excited, and they're playing any region that's not like Freljord or Shadow Isles, like they're just dead.
Yeah,
or unless
they
they have
can't
Rite of
win.
Negation
Targon or
but,
whatever.
Like,
But
yeah,
still.
but like there are a lot of situations where I'm like, okay, I know all of the cards that my opponent's deck does play. They cannot win because I'm going to open based on the mana they have. They can kill like 1 or 2 of my creatures. Going to get in for 4, and then they're going to die.
Yes, because there's so few answers to burn to the face and elusives.
Yeah.
You can look at your opponent's regions and find yourself in many, many, many game states where you as the TF Fizz pilot get to say, there is a literal 0% chance that my opponent can win the game from this point forward.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
happens entirely too often.
It's shocking how long how many times those game states are like the turn, like 2 turns before you actually kill them or whatever, where you're like playing this 2-turn long game and it's like they're already dead. I just need enough mana to cast it. Right. Like, and then the only thing is like, okay, well, I have to not die in the meantime, or, I can't get my whole board wrath,
which is usually doable.
But it's almost always doable. Right. But like, there's a lot of the time where you like look down at your hand and you're like 3 + 3 + 2 + 3. What are you at? 11. Okay. We're done here.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
or you just look down at your TF at like 6 of 8 and cast Rummage, and then you're done there too. So
Yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, I get people in spots where I'm like, okay, they can't beat this TF, and even if they can, they're just dead to burn. Then they like spend a bunch of resources killing TF. They challenge it. I like burn a thing. They like pump it, and then
3
I just like shoot the
cards,
burn in their face, and they just die.
The deck contains a threat that no region combination can deal with every single threat effectively. Like TF will beat, like a region can deal with elusives really well, but maybe it's really bad at dealing with TF.
I think Targon is the specific example of that region, that like Targon is really good, at least reasonable at dealing with both elusive creatures and burn to the face, because they have like healing spells and hush and some challenger units and all that, but they're quite bad at removing the card Twisted Fate and often die to it.
Yeah.
They have 0 removal.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so
Absolutely.
like, and there's a lot of like you said, there's a lot of regions that have similar problems, but maybe a different 2 out of 3 or whatever. And it's hard to find a deck where you can sufficiently patch all of those holes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even if you can, then your deck's probably going to be like, Freljord.
Piltover, and Zon.
Yeah. And then
We're playing like Ezreal Yetis.
yeah. And
Deck, Ezreal Elnuks.
No,
Do you remember when an Elnuk got nerfed?
Wait, what?
Yeah, they nerfed the like 5 and
was
a
way too
3/3 that
good.
got Elnuks out of your deck because it was just insane constructed. Yeah.
Oh, I
It
don't.
used to- yeah.
What did it used to
it was
be?
an army in a can, dude.
Yeah, you used to see like 6 cards and they made it 5 and like more conditional in some way.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
something like
did
that.
they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I played an expedition. I will never forget this expedition game.
That's so
yeah,
busted
Noble
expedition.
remembers. I was like sitting in the living room. I like poked. I took off my sock and like chucked it at Noble. I was like, "Come look at this." Hey, you. He was like, "What?" And I just like put this Elnuck into play, and it just immediately filled my board with 5 6s, or like I think there were 6 7s because I played 2 Everose and Hearthguards.
Gross.
And I had no idea I was gonna hit that hard, but my deck just had like 9 bold Elnucks and like 7 of the Elnuck that got them all that I'm blanking on the name of or
Do
whatever.
you guys remember the days in the early stages of the game where you'd play Expedition and without fail, every single time you hit 7 wins, your 7th game would always always, and I mean not literally always, of course, but like I do mean this like 80% of the time, at least in my experience, the deck with Elnix.
Yeah, it was.
That's the 7-win deck. It was just Elnix. Every
There
time.
was a lot of Elnux for a long
Well,
time.
yeah,
it was really good.
So the thing about Foundations is in this draft format, you can get a ton of copies of the same cards. So I played 7 Mystic Shot decks. I watched Alex play
Dream.
5 of Vorison Sentry, like 6.
That was my first deck
what was it called?
The first deck I ever drafted in this format had 6 Avarician Sentries and 5 Vanguard Redeemers.
Yeah, it was
and
just-
I was and then the rest of my deck was like Swiftwing Lancers. And,
Yeah, it was obscene.
And back alley barkeeps. I
Oh,
think.
man.
And my
Yeah,
deck,
like,
literally every card in my deck was a 2-for-1, and I was like, "This is the best game of all time." I was just smoking people with my 2-mana 2/1 that draw a card and the 3-mana 3/3 that like drew me a 5-mana 5/4 that ate their thing and drew me a card. Like it was so sick. I was like instantly hooked. I was like, it's like easy 7-0'd, drafted a deck with 7 back alley barkeeps, like played it. Drew 6 cards one game. I was like, this is the best game ever. I'm gonna spend 4 burn spells on your Alpha Wild Claw and then Mystic Shot you 7 times because that's what my decks all did.
Oh, that's how you hook a Magic player.
Oh,
Infinite
yeah.
card advantage.
I just drafted like 35 cards that had 2-for-1 on them. I was like, and I don't even have to draw lands. It's just straight gas.
Yeah. So enough reminiscing. TF is too good. I think any TF is nerf likely almost certainly needs to come with a Fiora-Shen nerf, and then probably then needs to come with a Lysandra Trundle nerf. I don't know what that nerf looks like.
And I would
Maybe
love to
we
see
don't
some
need it.
buffs too to the other regions, like we said.
Yeah, maybe like nerf TF, buff Wiggly Burrowfish or something.
Yeah.
What is it? 4-2?
Something that we haven't.
Let's make it a 7-mana 8/8.
Something that we haven't touched on, I don't think yet, is the reason that. So if we nerf TF Fizz, we definitely need to nerf Fiora-Shen somehow because
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
TF Fizz is really good into Fiora-Shen. Like that, if you're a decent pilot at TF Fizz, that matchup is like nigh unwinnable for Fiora-Shen.
Yeah, let's look at our matchup data from the ladder.
Yeah, let's see what this say.
The ladder.
My inclination is that the actual percents are much closer than that.
Oh,
Graham.
I mean, when you say nigh unwinnable, it's like 45-55. It's, you know.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, win percentages are weird because like
And that is a specific matchup that I think gets much worse. The worse pilot the TF Fizz player is personally as well. So that's worth noting. I think.
Yeah. In a world where both people are good at their deck, I think that matchup is very heavily favored. for
Yeah.
the
Like
TF
as
Fizz player.
skill level goes down on both sides, I think that it starts to get more towards Fiora-Shen.
yeah, it's like 55% for TFS. Kind of nailed it.
Wow. Yeah. There we go. 55-45.
Another thing I did want to talk about real quick about this was quick card popularity by region, and I went back. This is a really cool section that they have.
Oh yeah, I love that part of this.
This is a good
And
one.
I went back, and it's actually changed a significant amount. It's weird because in this post they said it doesn't change that much, but I think everyone has changed. Piltover's on his Mystic Shot Rummage, which wasn't always true, but Rummage and Mystic Shot has almost always been in it, and Rummage has been usually in it. Targon's the classic Hush, Pale Cascade in that order. 81% of Targon decks playing Hush, which is a little low.
It's about 19% too low.
Yeah, exactly. Really, honestly, though. Sharp Sight beat out Single Combat for the first time, and it's 83% of the decks have Sharp Sight, where only 62% of decks have Single Combat. That's like quite a jump.
Yeah, I would love to talk about that one for just a brief moment here. Man, Sharp Sight ended up being so good.
Yeah.
Right? Like that.
yeah.
What an unassuming card that just ended up being really meta defining
workhorse,
almost out of nowhere. Like it's so good. I think it's solidly better than Single Combat. So I'm actually very happy that people have finally agreed that it's better than Single Combat. But you should probably still play Single Combat in your Demacia decks. You still need it.
Yeah, you definitely do. And really quick, the bit of text that's like weirdly insanely relevant is that you can block elusives when you buff
Oh, that's the
something with
best
it.
part. Yeah,
Like,
that card is better than Single Combat a lot. Like because all these like all these random elusive champions that like you used to have to single combat. Now you can sharp sight and eat instead, and it's like so much better.
One of those things kills Fizz and the other does not.
Yeah.
Deny is at the classic 93% of decks playing Ionia play Deny. Twisted Fate actually beat out Zap Sprayfin for the first time.
This must be the first time that a champion has ever been.
No, Draven was the most played Noxus card for a while.
Okay, I buy that too.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, this is. Yeah, I mean, Twisted Fate beating out Zap Sprayfin.
61% to 59%.
I'm surprised that it's only that those percentages are actually that low. I guess there are a lot of Bilgewater decks.
Yeah, there's there's a good amount of Aphelios decks that are only splashing Bilgewater for Boxtopus that cut into those numbers. That's kind of like the featured deck of the week. I mean, none of the other most played decks are Bilgewater. I don't know what you're talking about.
There's just a lot of Bilgewater decks. Like they aren't necessarily the most played decks, but like there's just
Tom
a
Kench,
lot of
Tom
Bilgewater.
Rocket doesn't play either of those cards.
Yeah,
like,
deep like
doesn't play either of those cards.
you know, there's just a lot of fan favorites that are
Bilgewater.
that I don't expect to see in a meta report ever again or whatever. But you won't be shocked if you run into on ladder type stuff that are kind of not playing those cards.
Whispered Words is the only new card from a region that beat out, but besides Shroom, obviously. Whispered Words beat out House Spider as the top two, which
That
is
makes
cool.
sense.
I actually think that is totally correct. That card has been so good for me. Have you guys played a lot of Whispered Words? It's been so good.
I mean, they printed a draw spell into a region that previously had no draw spells, of course.
yeah,
Like,
I
what
mean,
do you-
I'm not. No, I don't think anybody's surprised here, but like, it's played even better than I thought it would. Like, which is saying something because I read it and I was like, this card's obviously great. You know?
Yeah.
But it just even feels better than that because like there are just a lot of turns where you turn on Reputation and then you Whispered Words into Whispered Words and then deploy 2 threats, and it's like that's like turn 6 sometimes. You know,
Yeah.
like that's totally things that happen, and it feels really ridiculous.
Yeah, absolutely. And then there's also Glimpse Beyond is the most played Shadow Isles card with the second most in 55% of decks being Atrocity. That one's a little
Yeah, that one is shocking.
wild.
55% of Shadow Isles decks
6 mana fling, baby.
are playing 6 mana or playing Atrocity.
I also bet 45% of Shadow Isle decks are playing Nasus in this meta report or something. You know, like,
yeah, that's pretty fair. There's a lot.
Yeah, in the world where Atrocity is getting played 55% of the time, it's got to be something like that.
Yeah. And it's also a lot of Lysandre Trundle decks that play.
That
Like,
were-
there's the
that are
Ledros
flinging
or just-
stuff.
Yeah, are flinging Ledroses around or whatever. And then, or, you know, playing a one of to like kill people with the Watcher. Like if you Watcher someone and then they try to kill it and then you fling it in their face.
Yeah, or they try to do the like cheeky champ spell thing.
Fling being a magic card that does the same thing as Atrocity for 2 mana.
Yeah.
Which is, yeah.
Which is hilarious because in
And it's
Magic,
bad.
that
not
card's,
good at all.
that card's ludicrously terrible.
Not ludicrously
It's
terrible.
seen play in Standard right now.
It's
Is
seen
it?
some play in some formats.
Oh, yeah. Standard is sweet right now, man.
Yeah, I
I'll tell you
Yeah,
about it
that
after this
doesn't-
Legends
yeah.
of Runeterra podcast. All right, Hugh, guess what the Shrima cards are?
What the Shrima cards
Yeah,
are?
1 and 2.
Oh, I don't know either. Can I guess?
Is Azir one of them?
I want to start with Dune Keeper. My guess for
Yeah.
number 1 is Dune Keeper.
It's
Correct.
Dune Keeper.
Excellent.
think
All right,
second one
let's try and get number 2.
I don't,
Yeah, Preservarium
that's actually a good guess. I didn't think about that.
is up there.
I
Let's
actually
see.
really like that guess.
What are our other reasonable candidates here? I think that it might. Maybe Azir.
it
like,
could be Exhaust. No,
Exhaust or Quicksand. Maybe
what's
Quicksand.
the 5/3? The 5/3 that gives
4-mana
vulnerable.
5/3 that gets vulnerable.
What Kai Sands?
I don't think it's that one.
Sands.
I don't think there's any way it's that one.
No, you don't think so?
I don't think so. It might just be Rite of Negation. Also, like,
That makes
like
sense.
there are
The
decks that are going to
counterspell.
be splashing counters.
Yeah, it's just deny.
counterspell.
Yeah.
instead
Ding,
of
ding.
that
Yeah,
one.
Yeah,
that
There we
makes
go.
sense.
We got it.
Yeah,
You got
because
there.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, that was fun little thing. There's always weird ones. I remember last time asking Alex what he thought the most played deck was, and Alex like, he'll never guess this in a million years, and it was a Nivea, and he absolutely didn't guess it. This is,
Never in a million years.
3 meta reports ago or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember talking about that. That's wild. All right, so I think to sum it up here, the meta minus TF Fizz, I actually think is great. Like
It's really cool.
and honestly, TF Fizz isn't that big of a problem to me personally. I do think it needs a nerf.
Yeah.
I think it's a little too good. I would like to see some things get shaken up. This episode may have sounded like we were like really unhappy with TF Fizz. I don't really feel that way. You know, it's just hard to have a negative argument without piling on.
Yeah.
But I'm really happy with most of the meta. I think most of the new cards are really fun to play. I've had a lot of fun trying to put LeBlanc into play and kill people with it, and it's been pretty successful. I had a lot of fun playing with Sivir and Renekton and stuff like that. Like,
I do have a minor complaint. I just really don't like the Lissandra mirrors. They just haven't been fun at all. They're just like such a drag. Feel very coin flippy.
That's pretty fair.
Like, I like them significantly less than I like TF Fizz mirrors. Like, I think there are significantly
TF
less.
Fizz mirrors are awesome.
Yeah, they're like very skill intensive.
Yeah,
and Lissandra
I agree.
Trundle, like whenever I play Lissandra Trundle in ladder, I run into the mirror like half the time, and I'm just like, I'm just so off this.
Yeah, I've played a few mirrors with that deck. I kind of liked the first few I played, especially because I was playing the like combo fading
The
memories
good version instead of the bad version.
Yeah, like right when that version, like basically the first time I saw it on Twitter, I like slapped it into LOR and played a few games and played a few mirrors, and I got to like absolutely punk on some people that were trying to play Dracthorn Inquisitor.
Yep.
And those mirrors felt really easy and good. So
Yeah. No, I think that even if back to summing up the TF is problem, it's not that the deck is just a high win rate. It's that it just preys on fun. Like, it's so efficient. You see it does everything. It has too wide a threat range, and it draws its whole deck. If it had one less threat or didn't draw its whole, or a little less consistent, like there's so many things that could be a little bit worse about it that would make it fine. But as it is,
just a little too good in a little too many places.
too many elusives, too much burn, too much TF.
It's really hard because it's like
I'm trying to figure out what to nerf. And I'm
that
just, like,
recipe.
can't
Yeah,
think of
exactly.
anything.
That recipe is like, man, what do you touch? Because it's like there's so many threats in that deck. It's like
Burblefish at 8, TF draws 10
TF
cards.
to 10. Like,
Yeah, so it's just number tweaks at that
stress
point.
testing is just really good.
And I don't know how to nerf
And I
it.
don't know how to
think
nerf
the
it.
best answer really is we need to see a more widespread answer to elusive. Just the keyword elusive. It's a little too like they're really in on the whole region identity thing, which I do really like. But there's a way to maintain region identity while granting a region the ability to more reliably answer elusives.
I actually do think Demacia is one of the best regions answering elusives because of how powerful the challenger mechanic is.
And Sharp
because they're
Sight.
so small, and Sharp Sight. So I don't think Demacia has that problem. I think Shadow Isles and Failure are fine at it.
Yes, because they have so much removal.
Like, there's just like ton of like big damage ping removal.
Ionia can't touch it.
Yeah, well, they have their own elusives, but they just all are bad now.
They're all bad, so you don't play them, so they can't touch it.
Yeah, so I think maybe buffing Ionian's elusives at least a little bit. Like, I rattled off like 4, like literally unnerfing every elusive card in Ionia that they unnerfed, I unironically think would probably be fine. Maybe we don't want to see what the Ionia Burblefish decks look like. Maybe that would suck.
Yeah.
But I could see, especially if we don't unnerf Inspiring Mentor, but maybe we should.
I was going to say,
that.
especially if we unnerf Solitary
Revert,
Monk. Because
yeah.
imagine going burble, Solitary Monk, bounce them all, burble, like.
Oh, that sounds sick.
Oh, hello.
I'm into all this. Yeah, I get some absolute garbage one man. I can get some jettisons here that we can cast.
Yeah, just you got like 3 jettisons in hand.
Oh, now we're in Ionia, so we can hit Rush.
There you go.
I do think that that unnerfing some of these Ionia cards could be the answer, and I think would be very good paired with some like Twisted Fate nerfs to mix it up a little. Shurima does kind of probably need a better way to deal with elusives than what it has. It does, like Azir attacking you with 4/1 Sand Scouts does.
Yeah, casting Dunekeeper on turn 1 has proven to be an excellent plan in every matchup I've found.
Yeah,
it's true.
Whenever my opponent
It is
or
true.
me plays Dunekeeper on turn 1, but mostly whenever it's my opponent, I always just want to. I'm always just like, wow. Yeah, I don't know how to win. Like, I'm taking 4 and it's turn 1.
Yeah, it's
like
like
I am
turn 1
going
Zoe.
to die.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it feels like, well, it feels better than getting hit by turn 1 Zoe, because turn 1 Zoe really felt like the end of the world back like with that Lee Sin deck.
I actually think your
But like,
percentage has to be lower
but
when you get Dunekeeper.
exactly, I was about to say, like, I think it feels better, but I think it's probably worse. Like, getting hit for 4 on turn 1 is like, on turn 3 or 4, you're usually like, I'm like, well, I gotta like trade with my TF because I'm at 9.
Yeah.
Like, I don't
I mean,
really
on
have a
turn
choice.
3, I'm like, or on turn 4, I'm like, oh, I'm very happy to open for 3.
Yeah, yeah. It's like no
Yeah.
good.
Like
All
in
right.
a normal game is what I was saying.
Yeah. Anyway, that's our take on the meta as it currently stands.
I just wanted to real quick say, play TF Burblefish if you really want to climb. Fiora Shen is good. This Lysandre Trundle deck is good.
Yep.
All of those other decks we mentioned are totally reasonable, but definitely play a deck with a good TF Fizz matchup. And if you want to climb, play TF Fizz for the next
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
Yeah, until it gets nerfed. Yeah,
or Fiora Shen, pick your choice. That's what you should be doing.
Absolutely.
Learning those decks that are really cool. Then we'll probably survive a round of nerfs.
They're also very fun.
Yeah,
also
absolutely.
very fun. Yeah. Which brings us to our listener question of the week, which is pretty on theme here. This one from Tede. They ask, what do you guys think about Fiora Shen overall? It seems to find a place in the meta no matter what cards are released. Do you think this pairing is here to stay, or do the mono Fiora decks have more potential? So I think to start, I mentioned briefly earlier that the Fiora Shen decks have gotten a new card every single patch. Like every time new cards release, there's a new card that you're putting in Fiora Shen, I've found. And I don't think that's true of pretty much any other archetype. And I think that's a big reason why it's still around.
Probably accepting the Zoe release, right? It was Zoe.
Well, there were 5 cards in that release or whatever.
Yeah,
and none
for
of them
that
were in that
reasons,
region,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, totally.
Every big release at least, or the ones that are targeted towards their region.
They get to Demacia or Ionia card. Ionia cards less frequently, but Nopify was a big upgrade for the deck, which it is actually
for
kind
a
of
time.
Yeah, Sharp Sight was a big upgrade for the deck.
That's another thing that we didn't say. Golden Aegis, very good in this deck.
Yes.
That's a huge reason of why it has a 56% win rate. And then stress testing is a similar power level bump for a deck that was already very good. And that's what happened with Burblefish, I think.
Yeah, and I will say that I think part of the reason that Fiora Shen always gets a card is because it's so easy for that deck to get a card. All it needs
is a slightly better combat trick.
Is a slightly better combat trick, a slightly better removal spell, a slightly better creature.
Unit.
Yeah, there's the deck's plan.
Playing Screeching Dragon.
Right, exactly. Yeah. The deck's plan is incredibly simple, incredibly streamlined, and it's just it's everything about it's so straightforward and so surface level simple. When you're playing the deck, there's a lot of complexity there.
Yeah, but your deck is really mostly just a pile of good cards.
Exactly.
Right.
Conceptually, the deck is very straightforward.
There's no coral creatures in your deck or anything that were here to get discarded, for example, right? Every card in the deck is just good.
Yeah, and I will say, this deck, I do think Fiora Shen was not good. At the beginning, it was very annoying to play against. People didn't like it. But when River Shaper was a 2/1 and Shen was a 2/5, the deck wasn't good.
Yeah,
when those nerfs happened and those started being good on-rate creatures, that was what made the deck.
Absolutely.
Shen being a 3/5 is so huge. He is so big.
He's so hard to kill.
What a large lad.
Yeah, Fiora gets a lot of the credit for this deck, but I really think this is a Shen deck. I think Shen is
absolutely
I think
a
Shen
Shen
is the best card in the deck by
quite
a significant margin, to be honest.
Yeah, people are terrified of Fiora, and that's kind of one of the best parts about playing the deck is you can kind of just debate people into over-investing into killing your Fiora.
And then you just kill the Screeching Dragon.
Yeah, and then
Cythria. It's this is a totally fine plan.
Beat a lot of people with Fleet Feather Tracker and Shen in my day.
Yeah, absolutely.
The 2/2 every turn. It's good enough.
Yeah. So to get back to the question, do you think the mono Fiora decks have more potential, or is Fiora Shen here to stay? To be honest, I think they serve different purposes. I think that Fiora Shen is here to stay, though, because that deck is just the best at what it does. If you want to kill people with Fiora because they're all trying to cheat in a bunch of X1s, or, there's a bunch of spiders roaming around, or people are playing a million, discard aggro is really popular or whatever. These Fiora Freljord decks that are trying to put a Chain Vest and make it a 7/7 Fiora or whatever with Regenerate, those decks can never beat that. But Fiora Shen just has such a good plan in every matchup, it feels like.
Yeah.
It kind of feels a little bit like Jund from Magic to me, which is just for those of you that,
good stuff.
Yeah, it's just a pile of good cards. It's just a mid-range deck with a pile of good cards that has a good plan in every matchup, and it's got some really good matchups against the decks that don't interact well with its a very board-centric plan, which leads to which is just all the more reason to play it, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And then those other decks are very targeted meta, I'm going to crush Mistwraiths, or I'm going to, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that Fiora Shen's going to be here forever, and that when you're considering playing this mono Fiora deck, I don't think the question in your head should be, should I play Fiora Shen or this mono Fiora deck as the two like answers. Like I really think that this mono Fiora deck is more like a Nivea. Like I'm gonna play this targeted thing to attack these small creatures.
Yep,
right.
absolutely.
It's more like or like a Lee Zed or something. You know, it's more like attacking the meta from a specific point rather than just playing a solid Fiora Shen deck.
Also, they're a lot less consistent.
Way less consistent.
Way less consistent. All of a sudden, you need to draw Fiora because it's like your
literal only creature in the deck in a lot of them.
I wouldn't say literal only creature, but like
I've seen some variants where it's the literal only creature.
Okay, well that seems absolutely heinous to me. But
there's a lot of them. I played a lot of it last season. That's like a lot of the Fiora Freljord decks just don't have another card in it.
Well,
you
Another
play
creature.
like Starlets here, I guess. Like,
Yeah, there's no other good options. Like the second best
Avarosan
option is
Sentry?
like Screeching Dragon.
yeah, I don't know.
And like you could totally put Screeching Dragon in your deck, but that's just not really your deck's plan.
I guess
slow.
yeah, putting all your eggs in one basket usually not the best idea, but it can absolutely work.
Yeah, it's unbeatable sometimes when your hand is Fiora and 7 pump spells. Like it's pretty hard to beat if your opponent doesn't have
Hush.
Vengeance or Hush.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
like
that deck can't be Vengeance either. Ooh.
well,
has Unyielding
they've
Spirit.
got
Unyielding Spirit.
some stuff.
Unyielding Spirit. I don't think there's anything else.
Oh, you might be right. That might be literal it. And you get to play standalone every time.
Yeah, standalone's nice.
You know?
Nice time.
All right.
Moving on.
Our next question is from Snanfobla. They ask, what champ that's fallen out of the meta do you wish to see make a resurgence?
Ezreal.
Ezreal. That's a good choice.
I guess he
There has just been 0 Ezreal mid-range decks since this patch dropped. I don't
think-
really know why.
I think if Ezreal is good, like the meta's often good. Like the games are interactive. There's like lots of removal spells that you're navigating around. Like the Burlfish games against that deck were always sweet. Like same is true of the Fiora Shen decks. Like I don't know. Maybe they should
totally.
Maybe they should rebuff him. That'd be fun. Ooh.
I mean, he gets kind of eaten alive by aggro decks.
That's
a
kind of the
concept,
problem.
like,
Yeah.
the card itself is just
Yeah, but like the Ezreal Draven deck's whole plan is just like munch on aggro.
Yeah, but it's just like
Collect.
didn't really work that well. I guess it's not
That's
working
fair.
that well anymore because all these aggro decks are now
go super
like
wide.
yeah, they're going really wide, which is not what the decks are good at. They're good at Mystic Shotting a thing on curve or whatever, but they're not super good at killing Dune Keepers. Or, you know,
Yeah, you
boys
do
that come
not-
with more boys.
They don't have Withering Whales or Avalanche.
you don't
Yeah.
want a thermogenic beam a Dune Keeper.
Oh man.
Feels real bad.
I refuse to do that. I will die before I thermogenic beam a Dune Keeper. That's too bad.
Like Thermo Beam turn 1 on their Legion Saboteur.
yeah,
nice.
ship it. Yeah,
Turn
done.
1 on a Dune Keeper. No.
Oof.
No.
We don't have the camera, but I'd hit that with the like Drake emoji. Like turn 1 thermogenic beam on Teemo. Absolutely. Turn 1 thermogenic beam and Dune Keeper. No thanks. I'm good on that. What about you, Hugh? Champion that you want to see come back into the meta?
Oh, right. The question. My answer's always been Karma, so I'll think of a different one.
I think you can just steal it. I think you could just keep
No.
answering Karma.
You give your answer. I'm gonna think for a sec.
Okay. What champion do I wish to see make a resurgence? I think that the answer is Tryndamere.
Zed.
Zed? Ooh. Zed. Maybe it's Lee Sin. I actually think it's Lee Sin. This is going to be this might be
That's
a
a hot take,
contested.
my friend,
This might be
yeah.
a contested opinion, but I love the Lee Sin decks. I think they're really fun. I think they're fun to play against. I know that that's not an opinion that everyone shares. A lot of people don't like dying in one turn, but I think they lead to really interesting game states. I really like the games where you like outplay your opponent with Lee Sin and you get to kill it, or like I really like the games where you have Lee Sin. I just really like Lee Sin decks. So that's my answer for sure. Lee Sin.
Such a classic LOR thing. It's just like that just made me think of the like I'm opening Twitter. What are we complaining about today?
Lee
Is
Sin.
it Lee Sin? Is it Zoe? Did you die to
Twisted Fate again?
did you die to Ledros OTK?
Yeah,
is it
60%.
Is it a deck that lets
Are we casting Feel the Rush? Like
I
Yeah, what are
forgot
we mad
that
about?
Lee Sin's bad right now.
yeah, I have not
That makes
seen
me so
really
sad.
any Lee Sin decks since the new patch.
I
sadly.
love Lee Sin.
Yeah, I know,
like,
right?
Lee Zoe is like my favorite deck.
Yeah, that's probably one of my favorite decks too. Yeah.
That's like what I replaced Deep with. It's like, why does this happen?
He was like, I'm never gonna love again.
Can you
All the decks I love are bad.
Devs, can you stop?
My snap answer to
can't I
these
have
questions is
fun?
always like, I just want to nerf reverse because I hate it when a card I like gets nerfed. I'm like, dang it, I loved this card. Give me Shadow Assassin back.
A champion I would really like to see come back. It was never really here in the first place, but can Vi be good?
Ooh, yeah.
Can Vi stop
I got
sucking?
nerfed. She was like the best thing to be doing for like 3 weeks.
Yeah, I was. Oh, sorry. Yes, that when she was released, and for like the 4 days that she was at 5 power or 5 health.
Yeah. I've got a second fun answer here. It's along the same lines. Heimerdinger. I would love to see Heimerdinger come back. I love the spells matter archetypes, and I realized that Heimerdinger was kind of like a controlling card, but I really like those archetypes where you play control, right? Here's my threat, keep killing your things and develop more threats while I'm doing it. I really like that card.
It's
really
no
sweet.
longer a problem that when your opponent plays a 1/3 on turn 5 and you have no answer, you lose the game. That's okay now. TF exists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That seems totally fine to me.
4 mana 2/2, and you're gonna lose if you don't deal with it in a turn.
Heimerdinger would be a great answer to all these Burblefish floating around.
no,
if I could put these three,
no.
if I could put these 3/1 elusives
if we
into play to
unnerfed
block
it,
all my
yeah.
Burblefish.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. There we go.
There you go.
We could put can block elusive on more creatures. That could work. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of random, but if Loyal Badger Bear said can block elusives on it, change a bit,
Yeah, totally. All right. Anyway, moving on. Time asks, is Weight of Judgment an unplayable card? Would you go so far as to call it F tier?
Absolutely.
All right.
not.
It's
So-
clearly a D tier card.
Oh my god.
It has to be D tier.
I'm gonna kill you both. All right. So a little background. A little background in the video we mentioned where we made a tier list of all these cards.
Link in the description wherever you're listening to this on. So
Yeah,
make sure to post that. It's on our YouTube channel.
The first video, in which I'm a part of, the second video I'm not. First video is specifically just the entire Shurima region, just Shurima cards. That's it. And we're doing a tier list of all those. At the bottom of the tier list is F, which is
where it belongs. F tier, yeah. That's where the F tier should be.
yeah. Oh, sorry, I thought you meant Weight of Judgment,
Oh,
which is where
absolutely
Weight of
not.
Judgment.
No.
So we got into a heated argument.
Yeah, with one very obviously right side and one side that needs to be admitted to a mental hospital.
So,
there was some judgment.
all right.
This is way
Oh, you haven't seen Judgment yet. All right. All right. So the parameters of this tier list, ladies and gentlemen, we were judging based on potential. That was one of the biggest criteria of this tier list. How much potential does this card have in constructed? Expedition does not factor in
of course
at
not.
all. Of course, Noble says. Right.
It doesn't.
Yes,
No.
of course. he
You're right.
says.
I agree.
So, and Alex agrees. All right, we're off to a
No,
good
we're
start.
not talking about Expedition here.
All
I
right, we're
agree.
not talking about Expedition. So, Alex, you remember the question I asked you?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So what deck are you going to put Weight of Judgment
No, not that question. The question was, is the percent chance of this card going into a deck and constructed 0? To which Alex replied, yes. Now,
It's clearly
now,
okay.
no. Shush.
This is not. This is
Quiet.
true of many cards in the D tier. All right, make your point.
Shush. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, if there is a 0% chance of a card going into a constructed deck, how much potential does it have in constructed? Would you say 0? Because I certainly would. Would that put it in F tier? I would think
All right,
so.
I've got a counterpoint here. I actually can I've since thought of the exact deck where this card is going to go in.
So it's no longer 0%.
It's probably no longer. Well, it's. I mean, it's
never thought it was
effectively.
zero.
It's
That's
effectively
Alex's
0.
grave.
Oh yeah. No. And you're fine. You sitting over there and you get to you agreed with Alex, and that's okay. You get to do that. Alex
I would
specifically
argue
said
that you are going to put it in the same deck with Buried Sun Disc, the other card that's obviously in D tier because the deck's bad.
Well, the deck's bad.
Yeah, you're going to
But
put it in
exists.
bad decks.
Well, you
That's
didn't.
the point of this card. You put it in bad decks.
You didn't say
I'm
that.
Not gonna, no, you asked me if I was going to play this card in Constructed, and I said, no, I will never play this card in Constructed, which is true. I won't. I will never play
All right,
this
it's getting a
goddamn
little
card in
warm in
Constructed.
here. It's a small
It sucks. No, you shut up. This card is so much better than the F tier cards were. It's so much better.
The effort cards were, in his defense, some
Awful,
real damn
completely
stinkers.
unplayable. If somebody Weight of Judgment in my TF in Constructed, I'd be like, huh.
Fair game.
I wouldn't be like, oh my god, Emperor's Divide. I'd take a screenshot and put it on Twitter, right? Like, you know, like there's a difference here. Those F tier cards are so bad. Like, at least for Weight of, like, how can a 4-mana removal spell
Okay.
be an F?
All right.
There's no way.
The reason why, all I'm saying, here we go. Here's the reason why. In the world where I asked you the question, is there a percent chance that is greater than 0 of this card going into a deck? To which you reply, no, it is 0. It has to go in F tier. You just put it there. You can't argue past that point. You can't.
I just think that I think that if I was
If
to
you
make
are
a
now
T-list
changing your point
by
and your
that
answer to
criteria-
that question,
okay,
then it's okay.
But by that criteria, like my tier list would have like A tier, B tier, F tier, because I'm not playing C's.
I didn't say it. So maybe this came about from a slight misunderstanding of the question. I meant, is there a world where that card goes in a deck? You thought I meant, is there a world where you put the card in? Because I know that you are.
This is perhaps too much time spent on this question.
Weight of Judgment is a D tier card.
It's an F tier card, ladies and gentlemen.
Dustin asks, TF is going to be nerfed. How would you do it? So, I mean, I think the obvious answer that jumps to mind is 10 cards. I think that one like makes quite a bit of sense to us.
Yeah.
And we floated with that one a little bit. Do you guys, where are you at on like mana cost increase maybe?
Yeah. So the best way I like to think about this is just by process of elimination, things we won't do. It's a 2/1. No, don't do that.
Not doing
That's
that.
a bad idea. Make it 5 mana. Once again, no. I think
Really?
that's also. I
actually
think that's a bad
don't
idea.
make it 5 mana at all. I don't think.
Oh, man, I think that's.
What if it was 7 mana and did all 3 cards when you played it?
I think that would be better than the current version.
7 mana?
You
Well,
think so?
no, it wouldn't be.
No, it wouldn't be.
I'm wrong. It would definitely not be better. I think it would be
Weird.
It would be worse because of the cards around it. I think that would be a better card in a vacuum. Like, if that makes sense. Like, I think that, like,
Still disagree.
it's hard to make the point I'm trying to make. Basically, I think because the cards that Twisted Fate is surrounded by, the 4 mana version of Twisted Fate would be better than 7 mana all 3. But like in Expedition, like the 7 mana all 3 would probably be better.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah,
Just
that's
like
obviously
how-
not happening.
Just like
but-
how the 2 mana version of Twisted Fate with no text on it other than his level up condition would be way better than the current one, probably. Because of the cards surrounding it. Like,
I saw a pretty interesting change. So I don't think we can change his power and toughness because I think
2/2
that
is
both
like-
1/2 just would seem really weird.
I don't hate 1/2 either.
well, you'd
but-
have to give him a different. You can't give him quick attack as a 1/2.
Yeah, 1/2
Yeah,
champions
true.
is just like
If you're going
not
to change
where
his
it's at.
stat line, it has to be to 2/1. You can't make it better. Obviously, that's not the point here.
And then you just make him worse against extra copies of himself. And it's just like,
What do you guys think about 5 mana 1/3?
I just hate that stat line.
I
on
hate that
champion.
stat line
I think
so
it's just
much.
an awful stat line. Like, I mean, it is what Heimerdinger does, but like,
And
That's actually what
Heimerdinger
made me
is
think about.
awful.
But Heimerdinger is quite bad right now. But like, you know,
5 mana 3/3, make him better.
oof.
I was gonna say I'd much rather make him like reverse Lee Sin treatment. You know,
make him bigger and
make
give
him
more
bigger
stats.
and give him more stats, make him cost more. Like,
That might be it. Like, honestly, like
Yeah,
like
totally.
And
If
then
you
make him
5 or 6 mana.
make him
and
draw
give
6
some more
cards
stats
instead
or
because
whatever.
it's by the point in the game that it is like he's allowed to
we
be
can't
nuts.
make it 6. Like, you cannot go down on this number of cards at all. It's so easy to flip him.
Okay, yes, but like you're playing in the deck that does it. Like,
I think the
there's-
point is to nerf him. So
yeah, I understand, but
it's hard. I mean, there's a lot of reasonable things. I think. The things that I
think 10
don't want to
cards is
do
where I would
are
start.
like, I think I would start with 10 cards as well. Like 10 cards
Yeah.
is basically going to require an extra spell to flip him. It means that you basically can't have the nonsense triple rummage turns.
the more
Like-
important thing I think is that it adds a turn to the clock of
Yeah.
the I must kill this clock.
Just-
and that's the
yeah.
most important part. card.
I want one more turn of that clock. I also think that like if you increase his mana, that like it would actually help a lot because, I mean, this used to be the most important text on the card was red card, right? Like remember when like nobody was blue carding, not nobody, but like you were red carding your Twisted Fate most of the time with a keg, right? Like, and that was like the big
TF
playing
Swain.
against aggro decks, and that's still a mode that people like. Don't forget about that. That's still the same card, you know. Like we're still going to be able to red card and wipe aggro's boards a lot of the time. It's 4 mana, so like
shoulders or whatever.
yeah, so like it being 5 mana would give aggro a whole nother turn to like get under it as well. And if you made it the same number of cards, like it would give the control decks a whole nother turn to prepare for it. It would give the aggro decks a whole nother turn to get under it. I don't know. The more I talk about it, the more I think 5 mana might actually just be a really good change.
I instinctively don't like that change because it is a 4 mana card that is a 2/2 of stat that has 8 cards to flip. Like all of the numbers, like it just feels weird. There's like a really weird feel change if you change it to 1/2 or 2/1 or you change it to 5
game
mana.
feel is so huge here.
Yeah,
like,
and
you
I
can't-
think making it 10 cards is where I would start. I've said before, but I really like this champion where it is. And I think a big part of the problem is the cards surrounding him. I wouldn't be surprised if he went up to 10 cards and we saw a couple other nerfs to the deck because I think that's pretty important. Like
Yeah.
I would much rather that small-ish nerf to him or no nerf to him and significant nerfs to the rest of the deck, but that one seems a little less likely.
or like slight tweaks, like maybe stress testing draws the card next turn, which is like a pseudo buff on it, honestly, but like it's a nerf for the turbo flipping TF thing.
Yeah, that could be reasonable. Yeah, there's some changes.
Maybe
that,
stress testing could cost 3 mana.
Oh no!
so
Doesn't do
doesn't
anything.
change the text on the
Doesn't
card
change
at
the
all.
You'd have to add draw a card to it, but
Yeah. Oh, that makes it better.
Yeah, because then
Glad
you'd
we're
actually
here.
cast it sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's. Yeah, I could see Wiggly Burblefish going up in mana.
yeah, that's the other.
That one
minimum
I
of
think
1.
should. Yeah, minimum of 1 would be interesting text to put on Wiggly Burblefish that I actually be a pretty big fan of.
Oh, it can't go to 0.
Yeah, because then when your opponent taps out, you know you aren't getting attacked for 9 next turn, right? You know, when your opponent
true.
has... I mean, we've all been in this situation before. You're playing against TF Fizz. Your opponent has 2 spell mana and passes, and you're like, oh, good. They're done for the turn. And you slam your Dracthorn Inquisitor or whatever, and you're like, this will go great. And then they're like, Burblefish, iterative improvement at Burblefish. And you're like, okay, I'm getting attacked for 11. Like,
Yeah.
this is really bad.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that's I guess where we land on what would we do? Probably 10 cards.
Probably 10 cards,
hopefully-
definitely some nerfs to surrounding cards, but it gets hard in that.
Because like
It
I
gets
don't want
really
Rummage
muddy.
to change because there's a ton of splash damage.
Yeah, I don't
like-
want Rummage to change. Like, we're not nerfing Mystic Shot or Get Excited, right? Like,
No
are we
way,
nerfing
no.
Pick a Card?
No, you can't.
Ugh, I hope not.
I can't think of a nerf to pick a card except
Yeah.
make it 4 mana.
Are we
which
going to
is, like,
nerf
No.
Fizz? Like, maybe the Fizz plus Suit Up interaction needs a small change.
Suit up is honestly like one of the biggest problems.
Yeah,
with
Suit Up
Black.
actually is actually the first card I said in that list that, like, I think that, like, actually targeting Suit Up would actually probably go a pretty long way.
Well, that's
Yeah.
weird because like you remember when we were telling people not to put that card in their deck because it was
Yeah,
bad. 'Cause
we
I
were
do not
wrong.
think it would be that bad. I don't think we were wrong. I think we were absolutely correct at that time, and it is definitely right to be putting in your deck now, and it was wrong to be putting in your deck then.
Regardless, I think that it would go a long way because Suit Up is one of the biggest reasons why these decks are like have as much game as they do against these like Avalanche decks. The like Fizz Suit Up plan is like really good there.
Yeah.
And so like, making it so Suit Up maybe make Suit Up cost 3 when drawn or something, or I don't know. And yeah, that means that Suit Up's probably going to be completely unplayable forever, but it might need to be a casualty that happens so that we can keep playing with Fizz or whatever. Like we might need to pick some favorites here. Like we're probably not going to be playing with all of these cards at the end of these nerfs, right? Like,
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
all right. Next up, Serious Face asks, how long do you play a deck on ladder before switching? I find myself bouncing around a lot when maybe I should be sticking to one deck until I've become proficient with it before moving on.
All I care about is winning. As soon as I lose a game, switch decks. Easy.
That's the answer if I'm tilted.
That is
That is an easy tilt answer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Realistically, if I'm like trying to really try out a deck and kind of put it through its paces, I try to give it 10 games, but like, I don't know.
I usually give it 5. And,
Yeah,
that's if I really, really think it was good. Like, by the time I've lost the 4th game in a row with the deck, it's not that often that I'm like, let's give it a fifth for a fair chance. Normally, by the time I lose the fourth game, I'm like, this deck's awful.
Yeah,
Or you're not going to be good enough at it in a meaningful amount of time. But that's much.
There's some difference, right? Like sometimes you play 4 really close games and lose them all because you're bad, and those decks I'm definitely going to keep playing with.
Yeah.
That was my experience with
those are
Shen Fiora.
exciting.
Yeah, that was my experience with Shen Fiora. I was really bad at that deck when I first picked it up. Like I remember losing probably like 15 out of the first 20 games I played with Fiora Shen because I was just really bad at it. Like whatever it was didn't really click.
Deck is very hard.
Deck's very hard, has a lot of like interesting plans. I really struggled with that deck, but that deck at least like my games were close and everybody told me the deck was good and like I knew it was good because I kept losing to it. So I was willing to keep trying it. But like sometimes if I like download a deck, see a deck list on Twitter, put it in my client, play 2 games with it, and I'm like, this deck feels bad. Like that's enough.
Yeah, on stream the other night, I tried out some a Fizz Tom Kench.
That was the one and done, right?
I played 1 game with that deck. Never drew a champion or follower, and then
deleted it.
I died on turn 5, hit surrender, then deleted the deck from my collection, never to be tempted again.
Yeah.
Okay, so my answer to this question is I go through the same cycle every season. I go like 12 different decks on a weird nonsense rotation for the first like 2 weeks of the patch. Don't leave plat for the first like 3 weeks of the patch. All of a sudden, I like decide to hit diamond, and then I just sort of do it by playing one deck, and then I mess around with like 5 different decks in diamond for like a week or 2, and I decide, okay, I should get to masters now, and then I sit down and I find the deck that I love, because every season there's a deck that I really enjoy playing that happens to be pretty good or very good. Last season it was TF Fizz.
Nothing wrong with playing the best deck.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't let anybody tell you that there's something wrong with playing the best deck.
Yeah. And so once I make the decision that like, okay, it is time to climb, I'm going to masters, this is what I'm doing. I pick a deck and I go. Last season it actually started as Zoe Lee. That actually got me to masters and like 100 LP into masters, and then I like stopped playing for a while, and then I switched to TFIz. So the answer for me is I pick a deck, and then I go until it really stops. It has to really stop working for me to get off of it.
So I think the real answer to this question for me is that I think that I play a deck for like a day at a time, and the amount of games that I play in that day definitely varies. But I usually like will play a deck for a night if I want to try it or if I want to see if it's good. And if I play the deck for a whole night, it's usually because I think it's pretty reasonable, right? And then by the next day, I'm probably going to play a different deck, even if I thought that deck was reasonable, just because I like playing new decks, right? Like, we have a podcast where we talk about decks, so I like to make sure that I play enough decks to be able to talk about different things or whatever. But so like I tend to change a little bit more frequently than I probably would if I was strictly just trying to climb. But I think that if there's a clear best deck or a clear deck that you're winning with, I just keep playing it. Like when it was TF Fizz or when I was
Zoe
Lee or when it was Stony Scouts or whatever. Like when you find a deck where you go like 7-0, just keep playing it. Like,
yeah, you can lose 3 in a row. You got to keep going.
Yeah, those are the decks that I don't stop playing. Like once you find the one, I usually just like keep going, and you're pretty much bound to find it just doing that. And a lot of the time, you're going to get random false positives, and sometimes you're going to need to get off the deck 3 days later because of that or whatever. But I usually just play a different deck every day, and then eventually I'm going to find something that really clicks or feels really good for whatever reason, and then just like try and abuse as much free low as you can. Then.
And the meta changes fast, so decks can stop being well positioned. So if you find something that you like in a bit and sticking with it, go nuts. And then that's how I was feeling about TF Fizz. It was great. And I ran into Lysandra Trundle a bunch, and my win rate dropped to like closer to 50-50, and I was like, I'm gonna switch it up.
A big thing that I think a lot of people forget about is that you don't have to change decks. You can also like make small changes to the cards.
Yeah.
So, if you feel like your deck is good, but you're running into TF Fizz 3 times in a row, maybe just take out a single combat for a sharp side or whatever. Or, that's maybe a bad example because you're probably playing 3 already. But, maybe add an extra copy of the box or something, right? Like you can change a couple cards here and there to have the same foundational knowledge still be building upon, while also give yourself a slightly better matchup in certain areas. And that's also really important to make sure you're tuning the deck. So, all right, we have another question from Mr. Purple, aka Ben. They ask, what are some features you want in LOR, like formats or deck building tools, etc.? So I actually think that most of the like quality of life changes that I wanted from a few patches ago have gotten added, which is kind of sick.
So for some reason, you can't make a deck with cards you don't own.
Yeah, I
don't
do
like
want
that.
that to change.
Like I'm like, I want to brew this deck. It's like, oh, I haven't crafted all the champions yet, but I want to see what the deck looks like. I'll just not do it. Like that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just like kind of silly that you can't like add cards to the deck builder and then not craft them yet. Like
Especially when you have the option to copy a code with cards you don't own,
And then it works.
shows.
Yeah.
And it works, and like that is an option.
of course that needs to work. If that didn't work, it would suck.
that would be awful. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. And the thing is, if that exists, if the ability to show a lack of cards exists, then you should be able to play with that lack of cards.
Yeah. I really
play
like
with it.
building.
I mean,
Like,
sorry,
yeah.
play as in not go into a game with,
Yeah.
but play as in mess around with.
Yeah,
in
you
the
should be
UI.
able to build your deck without having to own all the cards, and then be able to craft your deck once you've finished it or whatever. Totally agree with all that. Let's see. I think they finally fixed the like animations playing through your turn thing. So like that's great.
that was a big change that needed to happen.
I wonder, are there any real like other like deck building tools that you're like feel as though you're missing out on? I don't really think so.
I want the ability to unanimously change my emotes on all my decks at once, or several decks at once.
Wait, you can't do that?
No, you have to change
It's deck by deck.
It's
What?
deck by deck.
Oh my god,
It's-
I had
it's
no idea.
horrible.
Yeah, it's really air.
Yeah,
Well, this
no,
is. I guess this is spawned because I've never bought a different emote, but like, yeah, that's
yeah,
ridiculous.
you need to equip a new pet, you need to equip a new card back, you need to equip new emotes to each
I
individual
do like
deck.
being able to have different card backs for each deck, but like
I do, and I
there
get
should
the
just be a
customization.
button that's
Yeah,
like
yeah,
do
you
it for all.
You should be able to. It doesn't have to be that. It has to. I think it should just be like, you can select decks.
Yeah, or that too. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
cool.
I didn't know that was a feature, but yeah, I totally agree with that. That sounds great.
And then one last thing I wanted to say as far as formats, I would love it if expeditions like mattered.
Yes.
We had a really great conversation about this in a chat that I was a part of about how like both Hearthstone and Magic, like people stream the limited formats. Like in Hearthstone, people do it even though it's not the competitive format. Magic, it's one of the competitive formats. No one streams LOR expeditions, and like the game mode's very fun, very cool. I don't know exactly why. Maybe it's not high stakes enough, but
I've got a few theories on that, and I could probably talk for more than is reasonable right now too about why I think that's true. But I totally agree with that too. Love Expedition, would love to see more of it. So, all right, our next question is from Dragon. They ask, now that the new patch has been out for some time, what do you think are the best new cards from this expansion?
Well, Dunekeeper for one.
Yeah, so like I mean like we had like we made
tier
S tiers.
lists.
Yeah, we made tier lists. So like I mean pretty much the cards from our S tier from
Rite of
today were
Negation,
like
Dunekeeper, and then today was like
Blighted Ravine, Whispered Words, Lysandra, the Penitent Squire.
yeah.
That's a new really really good one. Yeah, I think that if you want detailed explanations for all that, I recommend
Golden Aegis.
Yeah, I recommend checking out the tier list videos, but there's a lot of really good cards.
Kai Sandspinner, I think, was an S tier.
Yeah,
Yeah, from
absolutely
First
was.
Rima,
First-
yeah.
yeah.
Inspiring Marshall as Azir. Like,
Yeah.
there's a lot of really good cards in this expansion, and surprisingly, most of them aren't in Shurima, I think. Or at least the most impactful ones.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's kind of because when you play a
Well,
streamer card, you have to play the whole region.
Yeah.
And so, like,
That
you
kinda
know,
makes
Whisper
sense.
Words is in a ton of decks or whatever, but,
Yeah.
like, it just slots into decks, so it's very impactful. Whereas, like, Shurima definitely shaken up the meta, but hasn't settled into. I wouldn't call any of the Shurima decks, like, S tier at this point.
Yeah, I mean,
Like,
this.
the decks themselves being the best.
Yeah, I
tier zero.
agree. Yeah. I think the best one is Sand Scouts, which is probably like tier 2. Like, I think
that's
it's.
decks tier 1, probably.
Okay, it's maybe tier 1, but
There's a tier
probably-
above tier 1 that has Fjorsh
Yeah.
and
TF is.
and maybe Lysundle in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Next question is from Episky. They ask, what cards in Empires of the Ascended seem powerful, but just haven't found a deck yet?
Weight of Judgment.
No, that card does not seem powerful. There's a good few of these. I think that like look pretty good. the one that jumps out to me is Three Sisters, where that card just reads so good, but it's just like not really seeing that much play because it turns out the 1 mana's a lot, but like, I don't know. I struggle to believe that card just doesn't have a home in somewhere personally.
Absolutely.
Like that card's really
so
good.
unbelievably versatile
Yeah.
and somehow just hasn't found a good home.
Just isn't really seeing play in anything, and that's shocking to me. So that's my answer. How about you guys? Got any good ones?
I do think like more iteration can be had on like the Bakai Sand Spinner decks, like the vulnerable decks,
Yeah.
Renekton kind of thing. I could see that very easily being good, specifically in particular metas.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that
Jarvan.
Jarvan, just Jarvan in general.
Kindred.
Shocked that Jarvan hasn't found a home.
I'm not. I don't think Kindred is nearly as good as you guys thought it was. But
Agreed. That's what we talked about. We put her in like C tier, and then I used my
Yeah.
veto to move her to B. I think.
Because she's sweet.
She is
It's
sweet.
Sweet, I think. I don't know.
I don't actually know.
I think it's genderless, and it's supposed to be 2 people, like Kindred and
it's-
Lamb, something like that. I'm
Well,
not 100% sure.
it's 2 entities, but anyway.
Yeah.
I think that. Oh God, what was I going to say?
Oh, sorry, I stole your thought.
I had my answer. Oh, this is a disaster.
Kindred's not that good.
Kindred's not that good.
We said it was better. You think that? All right, we'll come back.
What was
to
the
you.
question again? Repeat the question real quick.
What cards in Empires of the Ascended seem powerful but just haven't found a deck yet?
Oh, Sivir. That's the answer.
That's a good
I had.
answer, too.
Because like it feels like she goes in decks. There are decks that play her.
I've seen her a reasonable amount, but never in
Yeah.
anything consistent.
Not that consistent or not like that powerful or has very polarized matchups. Like it feels like because her level up condition is so like everything, like you're gonna do damage no
Yeah.
matter what. Damage is going to be dealt, and therefore her level up condition will eventually be met. Period. Like obviously there are ways to do it faster, but it's so ubiquitous that like I have to imagine that there is a home for her that we haven't found yet.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
tend to agree with. All right, and our last question for the episode, this one from Carinal, they ask, I've seen many notable players take issue with the play patterns and strength of the Targon region. Do you think there is any merit to this, and what, if any, do you think would need to be changed about it? Love the podcast. Keep it up, guys. Well, thank you very much, Carinal. As for your question, I'm laying off the pedal on Targon a little bit here. I thought it was too good for a little while. Now TF Fizz is like more relevant. Hush has fallen off the map a little bit. We might even see some more Targon as soon as those nerfs come in. But the Pale Cascade nerf went a long way. The Aphelios nerf went a long way. I think it's a region that just plays differently from the other regions, and I'm okay with that.
I think that Targon has some very, very pronounced weaknesses that it can kind of solve with Invoke, but that's like very clunky. Whereas it's like it's quite bad at killing champions. Like it's not particularly good at that. Unless Hush is what you need, because Hush kills masses.
Hush
like it
can-
doesn't kill masses, but it kills masses.
Yeah, Hush can kill champions, but they need to be killable by Hush, which is not all champions.
Yeah, exactly. I think they were definitely a problem when they had the trifecta of like Guiding Touch, Pale Cascade, and Hush that were all 2 mana and incredibly efficient. I also think that there's a little bit of a perception issue here because it came out and was good. Was Soraka in the first batch? Was it like Soraka and Kench? I don't remember.
I don't remember.
But
I think
we had Targon come out. Then we had I don't remember if there's another one in the middle or not. Doesn't really matter. But then we had Zoe come out. Zoe was very powerful, so Targon saw a lot of play. Then we had Aphelios come out in a single champ expansion, and Aphelios was nuts and has already been nerfed. Zoe, we were talking about how it was like one of the best champions the game had seen, and she hasn't been nerfed yet. And Aphelios
I
has.
stand by that Zoe was the best champion in that meta. Like as soon as people were just not prepared for the efficiency that Zoe was bringing, and she really changed the meta.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it really hasn't gone back. Like there's been less Zoe now, but like those meta changes have stood.
Yeah.
Despite not seeing that much Zoe, because I bet as soon as we went back, we'd start getting crushed by Zoe again.
Yeah, absolutely. And like we just saw a lot of banger champions
Yeah.
one after another. And like that just makes a region feel very prevalent when they're just the ones that keep getting the new cards. Like, yeah. And that's part of why Ionia feels so lackluster right now. They didn't get a new card in the big Shurima drop, and they didn't get a new card in the Zoe drop. Like, It's like, what the hell?
No, they didn't. They technically got a new card in the Shurima drop, but they didn't.
Well, but they didn't get a new champion.
Yes.
Yeah, which is huge. And then like the last new champion they got was Lulu, who has literally never seen play. And then
probably
before
the
that,
worst
it's Lee
champ,
Sin,
yeah.
who's like the only champion that's seen play besides like, early Karma Zed. And so it's like, it's pretty clear that Ionia just hasn't gotten much love from the release, and Targon's gotten a ton of love. So of course it feels like Targon's very good.
Yeah, and as for the play pattern part of the question, I think that, like a very good point that Noble just said, very targetable weaknesses in Targon. Like they're just very, very exploitable. Like, yes, their play pattern can feel very bad. Like they're very good at healing. They're very good at buffing a specific unit. And they have very, very efficient combat tricks.
They have a very good late game.
Yes,
right,
a
if you
very
want
powerful late game if you want it. And they have a very, very strong early game with Zoe. If, like
They have Targon's Peak. No other region can boast that.
You're right. They do have the best meme in the game.
I got spanked by Targon's Peak yesterday. That's a side note.
I finally lost my first game ever to a Targon's Peak deck.
Yeah, he played Targon's Peak on turn 5 and then immediately spiked to the 0-mana Field Rush on turn 6, and I just lost on the spot.
Yeah,
I was playing TF Fizz. It was rough. I was like, I'm going to annihilate this guy. And then he played like turn 3 Ice Shard, turn 4 Avalanche, turn 5 Targon's Peak, turn 6 Field Rush when he was at like 19. It was just like the least close game I've ever played. I got annihilated.
Yeah, that'll happen. But yeah, anyway, Targon, not a problem. All the problems I think we've talked about, like they've gotten a ton of new cards. The cards are really good.
Yeah, the problem cards got nerfed.
Problem cards got nerfed, and the play pattern can just feel really bad. Like getting your thing hushed feels bad. Getting your thing eaten by an overly efficient combat spell feels bad.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's not an issue.
Them getting the Celestial can feel bad.
Yeah, getting your unit obliterated because they invoked Falling
Feels
Comet?
bad. Yeah, Falling Comet. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm okay with Targon. Targon gets a pass from me for now. At the very least for now. So with that brings us to the end of our listener questions and the end of our episode. So I'd like to thank all of you for joining us today. Do you guys have anything else you want to add real quick before we wrap it up?
Yeah, just jump in our Discord. Like we said earlier, we have 97 people.
Very, very, very close to 100 members in our Discord. And as soon as we hit 100 members, we're planning on doing something special. So you're going to want to be a part of the Discord so that you get notified of that. So link is in the description. Make sure you join that Discord. Anything from you, Hugh?
No, I think I'm good.
Alrighty.
Don't do my boy Zap Sprayfin dirty like you did Shadow Assassin. Don't make him a 1-2. He's perfect. He's so cute. He's wonderful. He's never broke anything in his whole little life. Just leave him be.
Is Zappa here? I thought Zappa was a she.
I don't know. It's an androgynous fish person.
I'd like to thank you all for listening to this episode of Champ Select.
Not quite as sexy as
make sure to follow us on Twitter. Follow us on Twitter. Join our Discord. The link will be in the description, as well as the link to the YouTube videos where we went over that tier list with Nico. If you're interested in anything like that, be sure to check it out. And with all that, I think we will see you on next episode of Champ Select. Bye-bye.